Hi, this is Josh Marshall from TPM Media. It is Tuesday, June 5th, 2007. Today we want to talk to you about Senator Ted Stevens. He's one of the most senior United States senators in Washington. He's from the state of Alaska, a Republican. A lot of you may know him as a big porkmeister up on Capitol Hill. We've been reporting on this for going back 7 or 8 months. You may also know about him as the one who described the internet as a series of tubes. But today, what we want to talk to you about is he is moving closer and closer to a major corruption scandal in the state of Alaska. Now, we're going to give you a little background on this scandal first before we tell you about his potential role. First, we want to talk to you about Veeco Corporation. Veeco is a major oil services corporation in the state of Alaska. It employs all sorts of people up there, a very big player. Two of the main executives from the company, Bill Allen, who's the CEO, and Rick Smith, who's the vice president and the lobbyist for the company, only about a month ago, both pled guilty to bribing public officials. Now, the names of those public officials haven't been made public yet, but according to published reports out of the state of Alaska, one of those public officials is Senator Stevens' son. His name is Ben Stevens. He's the president of the state senate in Alaska. Now, in addition to being an unnamed co-conspirator in these plea agreements from last month, Senator Stevens, this is State Senator Stevens Jr., his office in Alaska was raided last September, raided by the FBI. So that's the scandal to date as it exists. You got Veeco Corporation, major oil services corporation up in the state of Alaska. Two main executives, including the CEO, have pled guilty to bribing public officials, and at least 5 Alaska state office holders have been implicated, although they have not been named yet. Now, here's where we get to Senator Stevens, federal senator, the big honcho down in Washington, D.C. Senator Stevens' potential involvement in this scandal has to do with the renovation of his house up in Alaska 7 years ago. Now, here's how this all came down. Up in Alaska, there is a contractor called Augie Payon. 7 years ago, he was minding his own business, and he gets a call from Bill Allen. This is the CEO of Veeco Corporation, the guy who last month pled guilty to bribing federal officials. Allen calls up Payon and says, hey, we'd like to hire you to renovate Senator Stevens' house. Now, what is a major oil services corporation doing renovating the senator's house? Good question. And it seems like Payon actually may have asked this question of himself, because in an interview, a recent interview with the Anchorage Daily News, he said he felt kind of uncomfortable when Allen first contacted him. In fact, what he said, here's a quote that he gave to the paper. Quote, Bill Allen, Veeco CEO, and some of the Veeco boys, some of the Veeco guys were the ones that approached me and wanted to know if I could give them a hand. I did it more as a favor, you know. It's one of those things when somebody is the head and packs that much power and asks you a favor, it's kind of hard to say no. Well, all right, so it was hard for Payon to say no to this request. So Veeco Corporation hires the contractor, Payon, to renovate Stevens' house. He goes ahead, renovates it. He does all the back and forth, signing off on things with Veeco Corporation, and he sends the invoices to Veeco Corporation. Now, eventually, he gets a check shows up from Senator Stevens, and it appears that this check is drawn from a special account set aside specifically for this renovation. Now, apparently, through all of this, Payon had never met Senator Stevens, really had no contact with him at all. Here's another quote he gave to the local media. Quote, the senator doesn't know me, so some of the people I had contacts with, i.e. the people at Veeco, were more familiar with the senator, so they kind of took over his interests and they kind of overviewed the billings. After they saw them, it was just faxed over to the senator, and the senator a few days later just mailed me a check. So let's recap. Ted Stevens is a senior senator from the state of Alaska. 7 years ago, he had his home renovated, but he didn't renovate his home. Veeco Corporation, this major oil services company in the state of Alaska, and particularly the company's CEO, had Stevens' home renovated. Now, that's a very odd arrangement, and it's even more odd when you consider that the same guy, Bill Allen, CEO of Veeco, has now pled guilty to bribing state lawmakers in the state of Alaska. Now, federal officials seem to think this is a fairly odd arrangement too, because about 6 months ago, FBI agents interviewed the contractor Payon, and Payon also gave testimony before the grand jury investigating VECO. Now, VECO Corporation and Bill Allen aren't talking. Senator Stevens will give no comment on anything having anything to do with this arrangement. And Mr. Payon, the contractor, was talking, but when we tried to get in touch with him at the end of last week, it turned out he has just himself hired a lawyer, and he's no longer talking to the press. Now, needless to say, we are going to keep looking into this case, and when we find out more information, we will bring it to you at tpmmuckraker.com. I'm Josh Marshall from TPM Media, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.